Growing up, we often take inspiration from people who are absolute titans in their craft. Basketball players like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, musicians like Michael Jackson, Beyonce, your favorite inspirational speaker, YouTuber, clothing designer. These are often people that the masses copy because of their creative achievement, and rightfully so. But let's say you want to be an inspirational speaker / businessman. A person that you might copy is Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, maybe Eric Thomas, David Goggins. But have you ever thought to admire something simple like the animals in your backyard trying to survive? Oh man, the sun's going down. How we looking? Okay, we need some light. 1 second. All right, much better. From the amount of time that I've been on this planet, I've come to the conclusion that everything is creatively and artistically constructed. From the ground we walk on to the objects we interact with, and obviously the people that we admire. So I want to discuss 3 principles that I've learned from my experience being an artist, and how to properly steal ideas from others to build yourself into your own unique artist, but not only that, just your own unique person. So number 1, you cannot worry about what people think. I've been saying this for as long as I can remember. If you can imagine it, then it basically already exists. Turns out that also just so happens to be a quote from Pablo Picasso. If you can see it in your mind, the puzzle pieces are already floating around. You just have to grab them and construct it all together. I'll tell you guys a story. So I was in college working on the plans to put together this digital art piece that I wanted to present in class. And this is exactly what I was telling everybody. I'm like, Joe, I got this sick idea. I'm trying to put the sun, the moon, and the ocean in a girl's face. And it's gonna be like the sewer. Like, I'm trying to explain it all to everybody, and they're like, yeah, bro, like, good. Like, but you could kind of tell from looking at people's facial reactions that they were like, they clearly couldn't imagine it or see what I was seeing in my mind, and they just didn't really understand or think that it would ever come out to look good. So I grabbed one of my friends who was in college with me. I told her the idea. She was all for it and everything. I had like a little MacBook Pro with the webcam on it, so I had her just go in the corner and take some pictures, some selfies on the webcam. And I looked through all the selfie pictures to determine which one that I wanted to use, found the one that I wanted to use, and I just spent hours trying to put this design together. So the idea was to take the double exposure technique and use it with, I think I used 4 or 5 different photos in order to complete this project. It probably took me a total of maybe 16 to 24 hours to get it all done, but once it was complete, it came out pretty dope. What we generally consider impossible are only engineering problems, and that's a quote from Dr. Michio Kaku. So the impossibilities are oftentimes just engineering problems. So remember this when people don't believe in your ideas or they're confused. Even when you're discouraged about putting all the puzzle pieces together, just realize it's an engineering problem. And once you fix that, then it'll come to life. You have to realize and accept that non-creative people think way differently from creative people. And this is something that I kind of struggle with because I always grew up thinking like, oh yeah, everybody can be creative. To a degree they can, depending on how you define creativity. But for the most part, people who aren't creative, they're in a bubble that's different from where creatives are. And Dr. Jordan Peterson does a really good job at illustrating how this is. He says something like there's 2 different bubbles. You have a smaller bubble, then you have a bigger bubble that surrounds that smaller bubble. Smaller bubble, that's the experienced world. That's where a lot of your non-creative people pretty much like to lie. So you'll run into people who say, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Typically, those are the people who don't venture outside of that experience bubble. So the difference between non-creative people and creative people is that creative people live on the edge of that inside bubble, and the bigger bubble is an unexplored world. And depending on your level of creativity and how risky or how far you want to take your creativity depends on how far you want to go outside of that inner bubble. Typically, those people don't venture outside into the unknown, unexplored territory. They stay in what they know, whatever it is that they're involved with. They do that every single day, and they don't really venture out, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you can kind of see where you can run into issues when trying to explain your out of this world idea to somebody who doesn't really explore outside of that. So don't let stuff like that discourage you from creating. But there is a caveat. The further that you venture away from that inner bubble, then the less likely it is for a lot of people to understand you, even creative sometimes. So it's really important to create things that are unusual or unlikely, but they also have to serve some type of purpose as well. And you don't want something that's so unusual or so unlikely, because how will people won't know what it is. They won't know how to discover what it is. So the more unusual and unique that your ideas are, the harder it will be to understand. And a big thing that a lot of creators fail to realize is that yes, being creative is awesome, but you also got to make money with it. Otherwise, you're just going to be the starving artist. We've all heard that term before. I've kind of realized that there's 3 different types of creative people. You have your creative thinkers, which a lot of the times you never even know these people. They're not famous. They might even be somebody who lives down the street, right? They're just exceptionally wonderful at creating and thinking of ideas out of the blue, and they're useful in everything. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Then you got the next level of creatives, which are creative implementers. Typically, those are people who are very well known, oftentimes like the face of a company or a brand, because they're very great at the performance part of creativity, but they aren't creative thinkers. And those are 2 completely different people. You'll look at very famous talk shows and you'll see like the talents who are performing the jokes. Typically, the people who are writing all the jokes or constructing all the dance moves, the choreography, all those creative thinkers are behind the scenes, not on stage. So you have to understand the difference between a creative thinker and then a creative implementer. Now, if you haven't been able to guess yet, the third version of that is somebody who can do both of those things, the creative thinker and the person who can also present and perform on those creative thoughts. Like just some people off the top of my head that I can think about, like Donald Glover, you know, he writes, directs, acts in his show Atlanta, for an example. You have guys like Adam Sandler, you know, directs, has all his friends in his movies, acts in his movies. Like those are the type of guys who are creative thinkers. Like they can create something that's unique and unusual, but also be able to construct it in a way that the world really appreciates and wants to consume. So that's number one. Don't worry too much about what people think, but also just be aware of how unique and unusual your idea is and consider how useful and interesting that it will be for the public to consume. All right, number two, there's no such thing as an original idea, and if somebody says something opposite of that, it's a goddamn lie. I can't tell you the amount of times where I come up with some crazy idea and I go and search for it and it's already been created. Not to say that it was already a big idea, but somebody at some point in time had already thought about it. Like there's 7 billion people on the planet right now. We're not even talking about all the people who've existed from the beginning of time. Like all these, there's just so many ideas. You're never gonna come up with something that's original. So if you think that, scrap it. Nothing is created or destroyed, it's only transferred. And I'm pretty sure that's a law from Newton. So original is the wrong word to use. You're probably thinking of something unusual or unique or refreshing, which kind of makes me think refreshing. All right, nothing more refreshing than a jar of lemonade. Refreshing. God damn it, delicious. That's what I was supposed to say. All right, nothing's more refreshing than a jar of lemonade. Delicious. And the beginning of creating these unusual or unique ideas starts with modeling or imitating the people who inspire you. But it doesn't even have to be people. It can be objects that are in your surroundings or even inanimate objects like a rock. Can you smell what the rock is cooking? For an example, let's think about airplanes. Like, why do we have airplanes? Why can we travel across the world in these big mechanical lightweight machines? Well, this whole concept started with guys who saw birds flying around. They're thinking, I wonder if we could fly around like these birds can. And they started doing a lot of creative and interesting projects. We eventually made our way to flying in airplanes to what we have today. So that's a great example of someone looking at the flow of nature and how animals move in nature, or how objects are constructed in nature, and breaking those down to their most simple and finest forms to be able to create something unique and interesting. Another example, I like Lemonade so much because I grew up watching Afro Samurai and I was really just inspired by the character. He'd always walk into a bar with a lot of other warriors in there and he'd order some lemonade, and I always thought that shit was gangster. And I'm sitting in my backyard writing this script thinking about how can I remix Lemonade to be something unusual or unique. And then I just looked at my surroundings and I'm surrounded by palm trees in my backyard, and typically palm trees are associated with coconuts. Then I came up with the idea, I'm like, okay, lemons grow on trees. What if there was like a palm tree lemonade? Like what would the palm tree fragrance or the palm tree taste or smell taste like mixed in with the taste or fragrance of lemons? Here you go, palm tree lemonade. It's so good. But why stop there? We could do like a bamboo lemonade or a cherry blossom lemonade, because those are separate trees, or maybe a oak tree lemonade. Or if I wanted to do some type of design, I could create a palm tree that has lemons instead of coconuts. Wait a minute, what if there was a way to genetically engineer a palm tree to grow lemons? You see, so you can see where creative ideas start to emerge from simple concepts of admiring the world around you. I'm gonna assume you guys already know how to take inspiration from others. It's just, you see what you like and you copy it from somebody that you admire. But this is all surface level stuff. In order to truly transcend yourself into the next realm of creativity, you need to take inspiration from not only many people, but many objects and many different surroundings. You have to look at it like this. Like, imagine yourself in a museum with all the biggest artists in the world, Van Gogh, you name the artist, right? You go to every art piece in that museum and you take very small snippets off of each piece from each artist who's known all across the globe. Then you take all those pieces into a separate area of the museum, and then you start reconstructing a brand new piece of art based off of all those little pieces that you got from all those other other well-known artists in the museum. Once you're completely done, you're going to construct something that is brand new that not many people have ever seen before. You know, they can't say, oh, this reminds me of Van Gogh, or this reminds me of Jay-Z, or this reminds me of Bob Ross. So think of your mind as the museum that you're the curator of. So you want to take all the people who inspire you, everybody's artistic style and their works of art, and take every art and put that in your museum, and then just take little bits and pieces of all of it to reconstruct your own art piece in your own museum, and then that'll create you your own unique, unusual creative. Michael Jackson is an excellent example of this. He has some of the most famous moves ever, most notably the moonwalk. If you go back and look at the people who inspire Michael Jackson, there's a list of other dancers and performers, and he kind of bit off a lot of those different moves to create something that was brand new and unique that people never really seen before. But you can see that it takes inspiration from several different artists. Number 3, your creativity is directly tied to your radius of exposure to new ideas and flows of life. The more exposure that you have to unrelated ideas, the more pieces to the puzzle that you have. The more tools in your toolbox that you have to create unusual and unlikely art. I think the internet is really great because it gives us access to the rest of the world through a virtual lens. But it's also really important to go out into the real world and experience these things for yourself. Interact with different cultures, different people, and new environments. One thing is learning another language totally changes the game for creativity because it's a completely different culture from what you're used to. And you can learn to mix and match a lot of different things together to create something that not many people really experience. How Latin music and hip hop music collaborated together to make something extraordinary. Me personally, I love the collaboration of like Japanese culture and hip hop culture. It makes like some of the best music and art and anime stuff. Like that's just kind of my style and really what I like to create. Shows like The Boondocks, Afro Samurai, Samurai Champloo, Black Dynamite. I think someone who has a really good exposure of a variety of different things in life is Joe Rogan. Like if you go and watch his podcast, you don't really know what the niche of his podcast is, but for some reason it's super interesting. There's a whole bunch of unrelated topics that Joe likes. There's MMA fighters, actors, physicists, biologists, comedians, NFL players, historians, conspiracy theorists. None of this is related, and to be honest, I have no idea how he pulls it off. It's really crazy going back to that chart that we talked about with Jordan Peterson, where he's taken some of the most unusual things, mashed them all together, and he still has it all presented in a way where it's very consumable by the public. I mean, the Joe Rogan podcast is like one of the biggest podcasts in the world. So the biggest part about being creative is stealing from others, stealing from other artists, stealing from our surroundings, the things that we're surrounded by. Even for this video, I pulled information from the things in my surroundings like palm trees or other artists that I've interacted with. This goes to show that everything that surrounds us is creatively and artistically constructed, like I mentioned before. My name is Sanchez, and on this channel I discuss creativity in business, men's lifestyle, and making money as a creative thinker and a creative implementer. So if that's what you're into, then consider subscribing. Comment below your experiences as a creator and if any of these topics are true in your life. Remember, you're the curator of your own museum. Steal the useful parts that influence you and create something unique. If you can master that, then I say you're on the path of major success. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.